All right, we're continuing on with Unit 2, Interactions Among Branches of Government. We are finishing up our Congress, our lessons on Congress. We are focusing on Unit 2, Topic 3. So 2.3, Unit 2, Topic 3, which is Congressional Behavior. And we're going to be looking at the first two required Supreme Court cases from the unit, Baker versus Carr, Shaw versus Reno, and looking at ideological differences and political party influences in Congress. So this is congressional behavior. Topic 2.3 is congressional behavior, right? And the learning objective is that students will explain how congressional behavior is influenced by election processes, partisanship, and divided government, okay? So the first essential knowledge, there's really only one, but there's a lot of subunits under there, is that congressional power and governing effectiveness are influenced by the following, okay? So the first one is ideological divisions within Congress that can lead to gridlock or create the need for negotiation and compromise, right? We know that when the House and the Senate are controlled by the same party, the policymaking process is much easier, right? The party can kind of streamline the legislation they see benefit, although they don't always see eye to eye on a lot of those things, but the general goal is the same. So it's just basically how you get to your goal if both parties control both houses, or if one party controls both houses, right? To gridlock or create the need for compromise, we're talking about a divided government here, right? Divided legislature, where the House and the Senate are controlled by different parties, right? Right now, in 2020, we have a House of Representatives where the majority of those House of Reps are Democrats, right? And we have a Senate where the majority of the senators are Republicans, okay? So we have a divided legislature. So what happens? Oftentimes, if there's a need for compromise, right? Both, in order to get a bill passed through the House and the Senate, parties have to compromise, right? They have to be able to compromise on a bill or nothing gets done, gridlock, right? Oftentimes it results in gridlock, an inability to accomplish anything, an inability to get laws passed, right? And this is very common during a divided legislature where the two houses are controlled by different parties. All right, the next point is gerrymandering, redistricting, and unequal representation of constituencies have been partially addressed by the Supreme Court decision in Baker versus Carr, which opened the door to equal protection challenges to redistricting and started the one person, one vote doctrine, and the no racial gerrymander decision in Shaw versus Reno, right? So we're talking about the first two required Supreme Court cases. Baker versus Carr. The state legislature of Tennessee had failed to redistrict in ever, right? I think over 100 years. And it was brought to the Supreme Court that basically there were many districts that were unequally populated, right? You had some districts with 10,000 people, some districts with 100,000 people, right? And the whole idea here is political equality, right? That everyone's vote counts the same. And you can't argue that a person in a district of 10,000 people, right, has the same weight carried in that election as a person that lives in a district of 100,000 people or 200,000 people, right? The weight that is carried in those districts per voter is much greater in the smaller district, in the less populated district, right? The vote kind of gets diluted in the larger district. So it was brought to the Supreme Court, and basically the Supreme Court had to answer the question, is a state function, is basically this requirement to redistrict, right, particularly in the state legislature and state Congress, right, the state assembly, a justiciable issue, right? Is this an issue that needs to be decided by the Supreme Court, or is this an issue of the state? And basically the Supreme Court said, yes, this is a justiciable issue, right? It is going to be taken on by the Supreme Court. Why? Because of one person, one vote. All people's votes should be the same, right? We should have political equality in the United States. That's what we aim for. And this is not happening, right? So in order to promote political equality, in order to ensure this mantra of one person, one vote, everyone's vote is equal, right? They basically told the state of Tennessee, you have to redistrict. You have to redistrict your state assembly districts in order to ensure all people's votes are weighted proportionally, right? Okay, so that's a decision in that one. The second one is Shaw versus Reno, right? This is a case in 1993. Baker v. Carr was 1962. Don't really need to know the years, not that important, but just for your reference. Baker v. Carr is about 30 years later in 1993. It is a case that has a couple issues. One, it has to do with redistricting, right? Gerrymandering. We know that gerrymandering is the redrawing of district boundaries to favor a political party. The Voting Rights Act of 1964 basically said that these states, these areas, specifically in the South, right, North Carolina, that had a history of diluting minority votes would, when they were redistricted, had to be basically approved by the Attorney General, right? So this is where Janet Reno comes in. She is the Attorney General for the United States, and she looks at the submitted 12th district, I think it's the 12th district of North Carolina, and basically says that is unconstitutional. Oh no, oh, we're good. Says that the redrawing of this district is unconstitutional. Why? Because if you look at the district, it was oddly shaped enough. It was so oddly drawn, and this is what the Supreme Court judge said that wrote the majority decision. It was so oddly drawn that you look at it and you think, that doesn't look right, right? That like redistricting creates some pretty odd shaped districts, but that is really odd. So they looked at it, and basically what they found is that they were packing all minorities into one district, right? This was going to create a minority majority district, which is allowed by the Voting Rights Act of 1965, Voting Rights Act of 1965, which is allowed. But basically, in order to dilute the minority vote by packing all minorities into one vote, you're ensuring that a minority is going to get elected from that district, but you're also basically packing all the minorities into one district and ensuring that all the surrounding districts would be non-minorities, right? Would be white. So basically what they said is that redistricting on the basis of race to ensure by ensuring that all minorities are packed into one district is unconstitutional, right? This is a racial gerrymandering issue, and racial gerrymandering is banned by the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, right? That similar to the Baker versus Carr case, that the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause protects our right to vote, protects our political equality, right? And that racial gerrymandering in this case is a violation of the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause. All right, so hopefully those make sense. Hopefully you have a good grasp of those two ideas, Supreme Court cases, required cases. Moving on, the third point says that elections that have led to a divided government, including partisan votes against presidential initiatives and congressional refusal to confirm appointments of lame duck presidents of the opposite party. So elections have led to a divided government, right, where maybe both houses are controlled by different parties, or maybe Congress and the executive branch, the president, are of different parties, right? Divided government. So often what happens is you have partisan votes against presidential initiatives, particularly when it pertains to a divided government, right? You have one party voting one way, and oftentimes the Republican Party will vote with a Republican president, and Democrats will vote against it, right? That's usually the way it works, and vice versa. Democrats will vote on initiatives for a Democratic president, but Republicans will not. They would vote opposite. So divided government often creates gridlock, as we talked about earlier, right? And then lame duck presidents, right? Presidents that are entering the last 6, 8, 10 months of their presidency, right? Presidents that are in the last year cannot be reelected, right? Usually second-term presidents that cannot be reelected, and often have very little power when it comes to passing laws and appointing justices, right? So oftentimes, the president will appoint somebody, but oftentimes that appointment will be rejected. The president may propose a law, right? That law often will get rejected by Congress also, because no one wants to pass a law or confirm an appointment for a president that is leaving office. They will often wait till the next election. And we saw this in the Supreme Court when Barack Obama was leaving office and there was a vacancy on the Supreme Court, right? Barack Obama appointed a justice, and the Senate, which was obviously controlled by Republicans, said, nope. They said, we're not going to vote on this. We're not going to even consider it. We're going to wait for the next president to be elected and let that president make that decision, right? So we know that Donald Trump was elected president, and then he appoints Neil Gorsuch as his first Supreme Court justice after his election. So lame duck president. And then lastly, the different role conceptions of trustee, delegate, and politico as related to constituent accountability in each chamber. So we're talking about the way Congress members vote and how they are responsible to their constituents, right? As a trustee model, right, that official, that senator or House representative, is trusted to make the best decision. So they might go against what the polls say is favored by their constituents, right? They might oftentimes vote against what the people want, right? If public opinion is not that strong, right? We know that Congress members, their goal is to get reelected. But if public opinion is not that strong, they might be more willing to vote based on their personal feelings or their personal affinity rather than what their people want. So that is trustee model, right? The delegate model is that they are a representative. They represent the people that elected them. So therefore, they will vote how the people want them to, right? This is usually when, in a gerrymandered district, if you have a high contingent of one party that elects a representative from their party, right? That's going to be more likely to vote that way. Or if public opinion is really high on an issue, right? That candidate wants to get reelected and people feel very strongly about an issue, then they're more likely to vote the way that people want them to. And then politico is a combination of both. It's a combination of trustee and delegate. It's kind of using both at different times. And that's kind of how all Congress members work, but politico is a voting the way people want you to sometimes, and voting based on your own affinity, your own personal beliefs sometimes also. So make sure you know those. Those are really important. So keep studying, keep preparing, and if you have any questions, make sure you reach out to me. Thanks.